So the main thing to remember when you're using trigonometry is what we call SOHCAHTOA. This will help you solve pretty much every trigonometry problem this year. So I mentioned in the earlier video that one of the trigonometric functions is sine. So the sine of any angle is equal to the angle that's opposite the angle over the hypotenuse. So trigonometry only works for right triangles because you have to have an hypotenuse. Cosine, C-A-H, CA, stands for cosine of the angle is equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And then tangent, tangent of the angle is equal to the opposite side of the angle over the adjacent. So the way that you can identify the opposite and adjacent and hypotenuse, just going to turn this paper over if you want to take some notes somewhere else. So if you have a right triangle, let's say it looks like this. Let's say there's your right angle, and let's say this is the angle that you're working with. If you draw a line directly out of that angle, whatever side you hit, that's called the opposite side. The side that is right next to the angle and makes like the 90-degree angle with the opposite, that's called the adjacent side. And if you were to draw a line right out of the 90-degree angle, that's called the hypotenuse. So for example, if you have another picture, let's say we drew it this way, and let's say we have 10 centimeters, 24 centimeters, and 26 centimeters, and this is your angle. So if you want the sine of the angle, it would be the opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse is the one across from the 90, which is 24 over 26, which simplifies to 12 over 13. If you want the cosine of the angle, it would be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So adjacent is the one that makes the 90 degrees with the opposite side. So adjacent over hypotenuse would be 10 over 26. Simplify it, 5 over 13. And then the tangent of the angle, TOA, is opposite over adjacent. So that would be 24 over 10, which simplifies to 12 over 5. So let's go back to the front and do some more examples. So here we need to find the missing value. So in order to find the missing value, you kind of want to follow these steps first. So label the two sides that you have either as O for opposite, A for adjacent, or H for hypotenuse. Then think about if it's SO, CA, or TOA, which will tell you if you're using sine, cosine, or tangent, and then we can write and solve a proportion. So in the first one, here's our angle. Looks like right across from it we don't have the opposite, but we do have the one that makes a 90 degree with the opposite, which is the adjacent. So let's call that A, and right across from the 90 is the hypotenuse. So we have A and H, so it seems like this is a case of CA or cosine. So we're going to write cosine of the angle is equal to A over H. So cosine angle equals A over H, and here we can put in our numbers. So it would be X over 10. This is kind of like over 1. So when you're solving this by cross multiplying, you basically have X is equal to, always put the number first, so 10 times cosine of 31, which you can figure out on your calculator just by typing it in. So you would just do 10 times cosine 31, and you get 8.57 if we're rounding to the 100th. And that kind of makes sense. It has to be less than 10, right? So 8.57 for that length. Next, let's look at what we have. So 20 degrees is our angle. It seems we do have the opposite, it's X. And this is opposite the 90, so that's the hypotenuse. So we have O and H, which means we're using SO and so tells you to use the sine function. So sine of the angle, 20 degrees, equals opposite over hypotenuse. That would be x over 7. So same thing, to get x by itself, you would multiply by the 7. So x is going to be 7 times sine of 20. And again, you just put it on your calculator. 7 times sine 20 equals 2.39. And just make sure it makes sense in your picture, right? It shouldn't be more than the hypotenuse. 7 or 2.3 is less than 7. Okay, here we have 10 degrees. Looks like we have the opposite. And we have the one that forms the 90 degree with the opposite, which is called adjacent. So here we have O and A, which means you're using TOA. So as long as you remember SOHCAHTOA, TOA, these are all pretty easy. So tangent of the angle, 10 degrees, equals opposite over adjacent, 10 over 12. To get x by itself, you would multiply by 12 to undo dividing by 12. So x is 12 tangent 10, and all you have to do is put it on your calculator. 12 times tangent 10. 2.1, that would round up to 2. 1.5 rounds up to 2. So 2.12. They don't give you units here, so you could just say units, or you could just leave numbers for now. If it said centimeters, you would write centimeters, etc. Okay, let's see what we have here. Opposite, and opposite the 90, that's the hypotenuse. So we have O and H, which means we have so, and we're using sine. So sine of 51 equals opposite over hypotenuse. So now we have x in the bottom of the fraction. So if you were thinking to cross multiply here, you would technically have x times sine of 51 is equal to 10 times 1, which is just 10. So to get x alone, you're actually dividing by sine of 51. So you're just going to plug in your calculator, 10 divided by sine of 51. Which brings you to 12.87 for x. Make sure that it makes sense in your picture. Yes, the hypotenuse has to be longer than the legs, so we should be good there. 5, we don't have the opposite. We do have the hypotenuse, it's x, and we also have the adjacent, which is 8. So we have A and H, which means we're using ca or cosine. Cosine of 33 equals adjacent over hypotenuse, 8 over x. Same case as number 4. We have to multiply by x first, so x times cosine of 33 equals 8. And to get x isolated, you have to divide by cosine of 33. Once you set that up, just use your calculator. 8 divided by cosine of 33. 9.54. Which makes sense because the hypotenuse does have to be longer than the legs. Not everything is drawn totally to scale, but you know that the hypotenuse must be longer than each of the legs. And finally, 21, we have opposite is 3. We have adjacent because it makes the 90 degree, which is x. So we have O and A. TOA, so we have a tangent problem here. Tangent of 21 equals opposite over adjacent, 3 over x. Again, x is in the bottom, so you have to multiply by x first and then divide by tangent 21. So it's going to be 3 over tangent 21. Use your calculator again. Oops, clicked the wrong thing. 3 divided by tangent 21. And it's 7.82. So a general rule that you can use is that if x is in the top of your fraction, then you're multiplying the other side length by whatever function you have, sine, cosine, or tangent. And if x is in the bottom, then you're dividing the other side length that you have divided by the sine, cosine, or tangent of the angle. So you should probably pause here and try the practice problems that are not word problems first, and then continue the video and try the word problems after you watch the examples on the back. So I think I told you about this before, that I wanted to build a ramp for my dog so that it made a small angle with the ground. So I don't remember the numbers, but I estimated. So I wanted a 12-degree angle with the ground, and the ramp had to reach the top of my deck, which is 3.5 feet tall. So I needed to figure out how long the ramp would have to be in order to figure out the cost. Whenever you have a word problem like this, I would always sketch it out first. It doesn't matter which way you go. I'm just envisioning my backyard, and I'm seeing that my stairs are here, 3.5 feet tall, make a 90-degree angle with the ground. The ramp would be something like this. And then I want this angle to be really small so my dog wouldn't have to have problems when he's walking up the stairs or walking up the ramp with his back leg. So I also want to figure out the length of the ramp, which is here. So this is what I'm trying to figure out. You could call it x. So let's see, once you have your picture drawn, it's actually pretty easy, because it's just like what we did on the front. The key is making sure that you draw the picture, because if you don't draw the picture, you don't know what you have. So I'm going to start with the 12-degree angle and see if I have the opposite. It looks like I do. So opposite is 3.5. This x that we have is opposite of the 90-degree angle. It doesn't form the 90-degree angle, so that's the hypotenuse. So we have O and H, meaning that we're using SO or sine. So sine of 12 equals opposite over hypotenuse, 3.5 over x. So x is in the bottom, which means basically I'm going to have to do 3.5 divided by sine of 12. But just to show the work to get there, once you know it, you don't always have to show this. So it would be x times sine of 12 equals 3.5. And then x will be 3.5 over sine of 12. And from there, you're just using your calculator and make sure that your answer is reasonable. Over sine 12, close parenthesis, 16.83 feet long. And then from there, I would have to figure out, how much does it cost per foot, and is it worth it? In this case, it was going to be like $2,000. I think it actually, the numbers were different. It had to be like 24 feet long or something, and it was just too expensive, so we didn't do it. But trigonometry actually really is useful in a lot of real-world situations. Here's another one, just hypothetical. Say you have a 22-foot long ramp that needs to be placed at a 12.5-degree angle with the ground. How far away from the base of the building should be placed the ramp? So again, draw it out first. It doesn't matter which way you draw your right triangle, so I'll do this one different just for the sake of it. So let's say that here's the building, and the building and the ground make a 90-degree angle. 22-foot long ramp, that would be the diagonal, right? A ramp wouldn't go like this or like that. And then 12.5-degree angle with the ground. So ramp and ground, 12.5-degree angle. We need to find how far away we should place the base of the ramp from the base of the building. Base means bottom. So base is always the bottom. So this is what we need to find. So it looks like from 12.5 we don't have the opposite, because that would be opposite. But we do have the one that makes a 90-degree angle with the opposite. So this is the adjacent. And we also have opposite of the 90-degree. Always that diagonal one is the hypotenuse. So here we have A and H, which tells us to use ca, which is the cosine function. So cosine of 12.5 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That would be x over 22. And here, since x is in the top of the fraction, to get it alone, all you have to do is multiply by 22. So x equals 22 times cosine of 12.5. And again, we can plug that in our calculator. And it's 21.48 feet. Oops, I wrote the wrong thing, 21.48 feet away. So basically, if this was the situation, you kind of have to have a lot of room on the ground in order to place the ramp. Where it says here, classwork page 2, homework page 3 and 4, ignore that and just continue on with whatever is on your Google Doc. And so I would go and try the word problems now, and then make sure that you check in with me so I can check your answers and see how you're doing. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your partners, your group, anybody in the class, and of course, myself. Thanks.